everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and I'm here with everything that happened at All In. What a show it was. Genuinely, myself and Sam both were worried a little bit that the show wouldn't live up to expectations, but in terms of moments, and in many cases in terms of sheer match quality, it certainly did so. So I'm going to run through all the matches that happened, and what a historic night for independent wrestling. Let's go. So there were two matches on the pre-show. I won't go into too much detail about them just because there's a lot to talk about, but basically SoCal Uncensored defeated the Briscoes in the opener, and then in the pre-show Battle Royal, which remember was for a spot on the main card. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about this one because it was pretty dramatic. So initially it looked as though Bully Ray had won. He last eliminated hometown hero Colt Cabana and seemed to have won the Battle Royal, and then a luchador got in the ring. I think usually the sort of garb that Rocky Romero sometimes wears for a little bit of a joke. That luchador was in the ring at the start of the match and was immediately put through a ringside table by Bully Ray. Later on, we all forgot about him. Looked like Bully Ray had won, and then like bloody Santino Marella in the 2011 Rumble, this luchador got in, attacked Bully Ray, ripped off his mask and revealed that it was Flip Gordon. He eliminated Bully Ray and secured himself a spot on the main show, which was greeted with a massive pop. Everyone was delighted to see this story pay off. It's one of the longest running stories, in the build-up to All In, and it was just what everyone wanted to see. It was a wonderful booking decision, really got things off to a hot start, and we moved forward into the main show. Next up, we had a match that was either unannounced or added quite late onto the card that I just didn't happen to see. It was Matt Cross versus MJF, a classic traditional heel versus babyface battle to kick things off on the main portion of the show, and it was a pretty good match. I've seen little bits and pieces of MJF, but I sort of see him as more of a promo guy than as a full-on, working wrestler, whereas Matt Cross is very much the opposite. He is fantastic in the ring, whether that be on Lucha Underground as Son of Havoc or just elsewhere in various indies. He's brilliant. And it was a good match to start things off. Not the most spectacular thing we saw on the show by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, it was pretty solid action, and Matt Cross picked up the victory with a beautiful shooting star press from the top rope. Next up, we had the big celebrity match featuring Stephen Amell versus Christopher Daniels of SoCal Uncensored, a big old heel. It was another heel versus babyface matchup, but not so much a traditional one, considering that Stephen Amell has minimal wrestling experience. He did team with Neville in WWE and showed, great natural athleticism and that sort of thing, but didn't really, if I recall correctly, actually do too much in the ring. Neville very much carried the bulk of their tag team match, but this was just a straight up wrestling match featuring one of the greatest wrestlers of the modern era and a celebrity who happens to be a fantastic wrestler. It was insane. Honestly, I think this could go down in history as maybe the best wrestling match ever wrestled by a non-wrestler. Amell is either a natural or has been putting in an incredible amount of work behind the scenes in the build-up to this event. I suspect it's probably a mixture of both. He certainly does have a lot of natural athleticism and strength and showmanship, even as an actor, of course, that sort of thing. But at the same time, the crispness of some of the exchanges these two did, it can't have been just off the cuff. He must have planned and practiced and essentially learned how to wrestle. It was really quite surprising and a really nice moment as well on the show, just to see how shockingly good Stephen Amell was. Ultimately, however, it didn't lead towards him picking up the victory. Christopher Daniels picked up the win with the BME, the best moonsault ever, but there was a nice show of respect afterwards. I thought Daniels was gonna go for the handshake and then hit him or something like that, but no, it was a legitimate show of respect, and I think a real acknowledgement, both in kayfabe and actual acknowledgement, of just how good Stephen Amell was. You could tell that he won not only Daniels' respect, but the respect of every single person watching, both live and at home. Next up, the four-way match between Tessa Blanchard, Britt Baker, or Dr. Britt Baker, I should say, apologies, Madison Rayne, and Chelsea Green. This was a very entertaining match, a very good match as well. I think it may have suffered compared to some of the other matches on the show because of just the relative lack of build it's had compared to things such as, Cody versus Nick Aldis, for example, but it was still an impressive match. Tessa made her entrance alongside her legendary wrestling family, and in the end did actually pick up the victory in the bout. Although the bulk of the action in the match was good, I think it may have suffered from a little bit of a strange finish. The crowd didn't quite pop for it, as we might expect. Basically, when Tessa made the cover, I think it was Chelsea Green actually came into the ring to try and break it up, and she sort of teased a breakup of the pinfall, but then, didn't make it. I think that was the deliberate plan, but, well, at least from what I could see, that was the plan, but the camera angle combined with just how close she actually got to breaking up the pinfall led a lot of people to believe that she actually did break up the pinfall and that the referee counted 3 by mistake. But I think even if it wasn't the planned finish, it didn't look too jarring, it certainly wasn't a disaster, and it capped off what was actually a very, very good match. Again, not the best match on the card, just like, Matt Cross and MJF, but it certainly did its job. I think it's also important to give a shout out to Chelsea Green, who was my favourite performer in this match. She came out in her old, Impact gimmick of like being the scorned bride at the altar, but it was like a half and half thing. So she had one half as just her normal babyface self, the other half as this wild, like, scorned bride, and there was like a handshake at the beginning where her left hand didn't want to do it and her right hand did. It was kind of played for laughs, but when it got down to business, she actually did wrestle really well too. Gave a nice shout out to her boyfriend Zack Ryder with the woo 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 spot and the running like kicks in the corner, and just generally a solid match. And I think in having Tessa Blanchard win, that was the correct booking decision because she's on a bit of a roll in Impact Wrestling. Next up, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship match between Nick Aldis and Cody Rhodes, one of the most anticipated matches of this entire event, and I dare say probably one of the most anticipated matches of all of 2018. A lot of people were shocked to see it this low down on the card. I certainly was too. We knew that by this stage it wasn't going to main event the show, but I still expected it to come at least in the latter half of the event, but this was kind of the end of the first portion of the night, I think. It was a strange one. It wasn't the cleanest match on the show. In fact, it may have actually been one of the weaker matches on the show in terms of just the moves exchanged and the sheer work rate, but at the same time, it was all about storytelling. Cody in particular sold his arse off to make Nick Aldis look good and to really, make it a feel-good story when he inevitably fired up and came back like any good babyface. One of the weirder babyfaces in the wrestling world, Cody Rhodes, considering he is in Bullet Club and was quite a big heel for the majority of the year. There was a very strange moment in this match where Cody did his big jump to the outside like his springboard off the top rope and was caught with I think a forearm by Nick Aldis on the way down, and they sold it like Cody was legitimately knocked out. Earl Hebner, I should mention, was refereeing the match, of course, threw up the X a lot, but I think it was a worked shoot because Earl threw up the X very clearly a lot of times, then blatantly went over to tell Nick Aldis that Cody was knocked out. I think it was a worked shoot. Cody at this point was bleeding, and it was all kind of, there was a little bit of a schmoz going on. DDP got involved. I should again mention that both guys came out with lots of legends of the business. There was Jarrett, there was DDP, there was Tommy Dreamer, there was Pharaoh, Cody's dog. DDP got in the ring and hit a diamond cutter which popped the crowd huge, but he didn't do the bang thing, which was a little bit disappointing. But I won't let it ruin my enjoyment of the match, I guess. Eventually, Cody fought his way back into the match, and honestly, this was one of the better babyface performances of his career. It was fantastic. He fought his way back in gradually, hit the crossroads. It looked like he had it won. It looked like he'd won the belt that his dad held on various occasions, and then Nick Aldis kicked out. And everyone was thinking, surely not. Surely Nick can't retain when this whole event has almost been the perfect stage for Cody to win this title. But Nick Aldis kicked out, and then Cody and Nick Aldis did the British Bulldog Bret Hart finish from SummerSlam 92 in London, England, with the sort of roll up, sit down, roll through, trapped you, I'm going to pin you. It was a lot more dramatic than I've just made it sound. That got the pinfall for Cody, and he is the new NWA World Heavyweight Champion. A huge, huge deal for both the NWA, the belt, Cody himself, independent wrestling as a whole. The NWA World Heavyweight Championship is back in vogue, it's back on the scene, and it's around the waist of one of the most famous independent wrestlers in the world. It's a phenomenal result. It was the right booking decision. I don't know if I enjoyed the work shoot thing, but it certainly added something to the match, and I definitely enjoyed the finish. I love that nod to SummerSlam 92, or as many people on Twitter pointed out actually, just a sort of classic old school NWA style finish too. Cody won, it was a big feel good moment, and then what followed was one of the more violent matches in recent memory, the Chicago street fight between Hangman Adam Page of Bullet Club and Joey Janela, accompanied by Penelope Ford. The story of this match was that Hangman Page was gradually losing his mind and becoming more and more twisted and evil after apparently killing Joey Ryan on Being the Elite. There were various reminders of this throughout the match. At one point, Joey Janela got a sack or like a bin bag from under the ring. We didn't know what was in it, and then it turned out to be the haunted boots from Being the Elite. It makes sense if you've watched the show. Later on, he also attacked Joey Janela with a telephone, which was the murder weapon that he used to kill Joey Ryan. You'll understand in a second why I keep doing that. It's not just because it wasn't a real murder, it was a work one, but it's actually, after the match, becomes more apparent why I'm doing that even more so. There were some horrible spots in this, like deliberately horrible, like real deathmatch, sort of scary stuff that Joey Janela is absolutely no stranger to, I'm sure, but it was still hard to watch. He took the worst bumps of the event comfortably. It was really quite cringe-inducing, the amount of like pain that it must have caused him, and the risk of injury was through the roof. Adam Page hit a burning hammer off the apron onto a ladder. He threw him off the entrance ramp, over a flight of steps, through 2 tables, and Joey Janela came up short. He just clipped his head on the first table, and it didn't really break his fall at all. He just slammed into the floor, but full credit to him for continuing the match. The ending came when the pair scaled a ladder in the ring, and Adam Page delivered a very impressive rite of passage through a table next to the ladder and picked up the 1-2-3, but that wasn't the entire story of this part of the show. After the match was done, we basically got, you know, when Undertaker loses a buried alive match and then comes back from the dead with his druids and everything. We got that with Joey Ryan, but instead of druids, we had people dressed as penises. It was bizarre and hilarious at the same time, and quite a jarring switch of tone actually, from a sickening, horrible death match, kind of, well, not a death match, but a really hardcore extreme match, to this absolute comedy. Joey Ryan came out, one of the best comedy guys in the business, of course, hit the old dick plex or whatever he calls it, where he flips the guy with his cock, and then hit another move, I can't remember, a more proper wrestling move, and then basically posed, and everyone was happy that he's back and he's alive and hooray. So that was lovely stuff. Again, quite a strange shift from the ultra serious to the ultra comedic, but I think honestly on a show like this it did work, and it helped to sort of lighten the mood after Cody's very emotional victory. Next up, Jay Lethal, who has recently been fighting the urge to transform back into his Black Machismo, Randy Savage impersonation kind of gimmick character. Backstage he was tapped by an unseen person, and it made him snap into like his Randy Savage sort of deal, and that person turned out to be Lanny Poffo, the real life brother of Randy Savage. Jay Lethal came out to Pomp and Circumstance, Savage's theme tune, fully decked out in Randy Savage gear, and of course carrying the Ring of Honor World Championship, which he was defending against Flip Gordon, the winner of the pre-show Battle Royal, who was accompanied by Cody Rhodes, because of course she's not only Cody's wife, she's also friends with Flip, and they're just friends, and there's nothing weird about it. This match was full of references to Randy Savage. He at one point scooped up Brandy Rhodes, confusing her for Miss Elizabeth, and paraded around the ring like at WrestleMania. At one point Flip started to hulk up like Hogan, and they did a nice Hogan exchange with like the punches and then the U and the trembling and all that. It was quite a cool moment, but you know, obviously Hulk Hogan's a very controversial figure these days, but it was still pretty nice to see, and it popped the crowd. Eventually, after a very impressive performance from Flip Gordon, this was a real key match in his career, I feel. Jay Lethal was able to pick up the victory. He got transformed back into Jay Lethal himself after taking another similar sort of chop slap to the shoulder chest region, hit the lethal injection, and picked up the victory. It was a really good match. You could tell that Jay Lethal was the more experienced guy and helping Flip through the match, but honestly this was a very impressive performance from Flip, a man who is often criticized for being a bit style over substance. Yeah, he can do lots of flips, but can he wrestle a proper serious wrestling match? It turns out yes, he can. After the match, Bully Ray came out and beat down Flip as revenge for his elimination in the pre-show Battle Royal, but the day was saved by hometown boy Colt Cabana, and all 3 guys put Bully Ray through a table. It was a big happy moment, and there's not much more to say apart from that. Flip Gordon got a nice show of respect afterwards as well for his excellent challenge, and I think honestly this is a really important step in his career. Next up, Kenny Omega versus Pentagon Jr., or Penta El Zero as he was known on the show. His name often changes depending on who he's wrestling for. Up until this point I think this was probably the best match of the night, but not the best match overall, as we shall see. This was a hard-hitting match, as you'd imagine. Big chops from both guys, a lot of pile drivers, a lot of scary bumps on the head by the looks of things, one on the apron, a couple in the ring from both guys. Kenny Omega also dished out a bit of Pentagon's own moveset to Pentagon. It was just a really good match between 2 of the best wrestlers in the world, and a very unique matchup as well. It was crazy and cool to see both guys in the ring with each other. Kenny Omega eventually picked up the win, but it wasn't straightforward. At one point Penta broke his arm, his right arm, which as commentary sold perfectly is the arm that he uses to cradle the head in the One-Winged Angel, his finish. He eventually did hit the One-Winged Angel for the win, but used his left hand to cradle the head instead. It was very clever. And then the lights went down and we all thought it was CM Punk, because the lights were down for a long time, but it wasn't CM Punk. Then the lights came back up and nothing seemed to have changed. Kenny Omega was still in the ring, Penta was still lying prone in the ring, having lost the match. And then Penta got up and his tattoos seemed to have changed, and he might have looked a slightly different body shape. And then he sprinted across the ring and hit the code breaker a couple of times, and it was Chris Jericho coming back to haunt Kenny Omega once again, and he announced that their match will take place on the Jericho Cruise. It was a great reveal from Jericho, the master of surprises in wrestling these days, the master of constantly surprising the crowd, constantly reinventing himself, and always proving to be a very popular addition to any card that he is on. I look forward to their second match as well, because, I mean, I'm not going on the cruise, but it'll be a good match because their match at Wrestle Kingdom was excellent. Jericho can still very much go, despite being a little bit older than most guys in their prime. Next up, we had personally my favourite match of the night, and one of the most entertaining matches I think we've seen all year. Marty Scurll versus Kazuchika Okada. The story of this was kind of that Okada didn't really take Scurll too seriously as a threat because he's a smaller guy, a junior heavyweight, whereas Okada is a heavyweight and is coming off the back of a record-breaking, amazing IWGP Heavyweight Championship reign. And honestly, I think this may be the best Marty Scurll match I've ever seen. Not just because of Okada. Marty absolutely wrestled out of his own skin. He was fantastic, better than I think I've seen him in a long time, maybe ever. He was wonderful. It was a great match. It was so good. It built slowly, lasted quite a long time. I think it may have been the longest match of the night, and it was worth every single second. It also featured one of the best near falls of 2018. It was crazy. Marty Scurll hit the Rainmaker, and the timing of it and the fact that he'd been building up ahead of steam until this point, and it was a bit of a shocking moment to see him hit Okada with his own finisher. I honestly thought Marty was going to win. And if he had won, the entire New Japan divisional system would have been blown way open. We don't know what would have happened because of that. As it turns out, Okada kicked out. It was an awesome near fall. And then he actually picked up the win with, I think, 2 Rainmakers chained together. It was a wonderful match. Okada is again proving why he's one of the greatest of all time already. And Marty Scurll stepped up his game an immeasurable amount for one of the biggest matches of his career. It was wonderful. At first I was surprised this went on this late in the show. I thought this would be the first big match of the early portion of the show, but after seeing how good it was, I can't really say I'm too surprised. And finally, the main event, and by this point, honestly, they were kind of rushing through things. They were like, let's get straight to the main event, and they did. It was Rey Mysterio, Bandido, and Fenix versus the Golden Elite, the Young Bucks and Kota Ibushi. I'm not even going to try and break this match down, really. It was just insane. Remember the old PWG match from a couple of years ago? Ospreay, Seidel, and Ricochet against the Bucks and Adam Cole. This was that in a bigger arena. There were crazy flips. Everything was a million miles an hour. It was very exciting, and it was the perfect sort of match to send a crowd of smarky wrestling fans home happy. It was so indie, so many flips, but at the same time, a lot of good wrestling in there as well. It wasn't just all high spots. It was predominantly high spots, but the high spots were good and they were entertaining. I'm honestly amazed at the lack of botches in this match, considering the degree of difficulty of a lot of the stuff all 6 men were doing. Even Rey kept up. I'm saying that like it's a surprise. It's not, because he's ageless and amazing, but he kept up with a lot of younger, faster guys. And eventually, a little bit earlier than I think a lot of us expected this match to go, the Young Bucks picked up the win, and Kota Ibushi as well, sorry Kota, with the Meltzer driver, and yeah, they picked up the win. I can't exactly remember who they got the pinfall on. Wasn't Rey Mysterio. That's all you really need to know. I thought afterwards that Cody would come out with his new belt and they'd all have a big Bullet Club send-off. Marty would come out and they'd all be like, thanks for coming. And Sam predicted that they were going to announce All In 2 for next year. None of that happened. They were really pushed for time, I think, because commentary just went, that's it, that's the show. And they faded out. Fight TV ended the show then. Luckily, the match finished in time, because that would have been very embarrassing if it hadn't, but thankfully it did. And it was a strangely abrupt ending to a night that kind of needed a bigger sort of send-off. But at the same time, it was a fantastic match. It's a minor gripe I have with what was on the whole a very good wrestling show. So that's it. That is my review of what happened at All In. A wonderful show, a wonderful night for independent wrestling, and a great success for everyone involved. Well done, Bucks. Well done, Cody. You bloody great lads. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Thank you very much for watching this video. You can follow me if you want on Twitter at JackTheJobber. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you want to as well, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Cultaholic. And never forget, of course, to join us.